Greetings, YouTube. Recently, a survey on diversity was done, and they asked some specific questions, and they actually put them in some unusual terms, in my opinion. And I'm going to answer each of these questions in turn. But the way the questions were asked is, according to the World Value Survey, percentage of respondents that would not like fill in the blank as neighbors. So they're basically asking, what types of people are you tolerant of in your backyard? And the first question is, according to the World Value Survey, percentage of respondents that would not like having drug addicts as neighbors. The lowest percentage, the most accepting of this, would be Hong Kong at 12%. U.S. is at 93% people would not want drug addicts as neighbors, and the least tolerant was South Korea at 98%. Now, personally, my issue isn't with the drug addicts themselves. I don't want anyone addicted to anything, mind you. It's with the unfortunate ancillary aspects of drug addiction. Drug addicts in America are very likely engaged in illegal activities. Illegal activities kind of attract other illegal activities. Sometimes it's by the drug addicts directly in the case of robbery or breaking and entering, or indirectly from people that they're dealing with or buying from. So my issue is with the things around being a drug addict. If it's just a drug addict and they're by themselves and they're not bugging anybody, I'm not really going to care a whole lot. Second question. Percentage of respondents that would not like people of different as neighbors. The most accepting people in this were the Swedes at 1.8%.
U.S. here falls into the 4% of Americans are not happy with having people of a different race. And the least accepting is Hong Kong at 86%. I'm utterly and completely indifferent to what race someone is in my building or my neighborhood. I just don't care. It doesn't matter to me in the least. Next question. Would you not like having people with AIDS as neighbors? The most tolerant were, again, the Swiss at 6% were uncomfortable with it. Americans, 15% of Americans were with this. And Jordan was the most intolerant of this at 96%. And again, it's not going to have any bearing on my life in the least. What disease a person has as my neighbors, particularly one which is not an airborne pathogen, really doesn't concern me. I wouldn't even imagine how I would know that unless they told me specific. And it's none of my business, so they don't have to tell me. Which percentage of respondents that would not like immigrants or foreign workers as neighbors? The most tolerant of that in this category were the Swedes at 2%. Americans were at 13% of Americans are unhappy with having immigrants as neighbors. And the least tolerant, Hong Kong at 93%. As long as they are legal immigrants and they're documented workers, I don't care. It has no bearing on my life whatsoever. Okay, next. Would you not like having homosexuals as neighbors? The most tolerant at 4% are the Swedes. 26% of Americans are prejudiced against gay people. And 97% of people in Jordan are prejudiced against gay people in their communities. I could care less. I have gay neighbors now. I've had gay neighbors in the past. I am supposing I'll have gay neighbors in the future. I don't care. Percentage of respondents that would not like having people of a different religion as neighbors. Best at this were the Swedes, 1.5%. American, 2.6% of Americans don't want someone of a different faith as neighbors. And the least tolerant is 51%, and that's Jordan. Seeing as I am a minority religion, I am always surrounded by people of a different religion. Never bothers me. Heavy drinkers. For me, this falls into the same category as drug addiction. It's not the drinking the person does themselves, it's the things that they do because of the drinking, or the things that are attracted, or the activity around them because of the drinking. If they're screaming drunks, I don't want them as neighbor.
But I wouldn't want them as neighbors if they were loud, screaming neighbors. They're sitting at their home drinking
While they have my pity and my empathy, going to care. Hong Kong was the most tolerant. 19% of Hong Kong residents don't want them as neighbors. 72% of Americans don't want them as neighbors. And 96% of people in Jordan want them as neighbors. How many people would not like unmarried couples living together as neighbors? The most tolerant is the Netherlands at 0.5%. Only 0.5% of the people in the Netherlands, the Dutch, care whether their neighbors are married or not. 8.4% of Americans are concerned about this, and Jordan is concerned about this by 86.6% of the population. Since I have been, in the past, an unmarried couple living together, you can see that it doesn't really bother me in the least. Last question. What percentage of respondents would not like people who speak a different language as neighbors? The most tolerant are the Swedes at 1.5%. Americans are at 11.1%. 11% of Americans don't like having neighbors that speak a foreign language. And in Jordan, it is 48%. So, again, it has no bearing on my life. So long as I can communicate well enough that we make sure that the buildings aren't burning down and that we're not infringing upon each other's parking spaces, I'm okay with people who speak another language in my area. I work with people who speak languages from all kinds of... in fact, at one time I worked with people from 6 different countries that spoke Spanish. It was kind of interesting because they all spoke it slightly differently. So, you stand on these questions. What do you think about these topics? I'm going to give a link to the survey so you can look at the questions in text if you'd like, because I'm not going to copy them. The one thing we should learn from this the most is that people in Sweden are really tolerant, which is why I keep telling people that I would really love if America would adopt a Swedish-style form of social welfare system, because apparently it makes the Swedes really pleasant to be around.